Good afternoon, practice members. Jimmy Hiller here. I got a treat for you this week. Obviously, this week we're going to be talking a little bit about budgets, and I thought that I'd bring Philip Mize, Hiller CFO, in to help out with this week's lesson because obviously he is the expert. He is the financial expert in our business, so we thought we'd share some of his wisdom with you today. So, Philip, thank you for joining me this week.
Good to be with you.
All right, so obviously we're going to talk a little bit about it, and the budget is really, in my mind, just a plan. Your business is simply a vehicle to get you what you want out of your life, and we've said it before, money is the fuel that provides, money provides the fuel to that vehicle to get you where you want to go. So your budget, when we talk about it, is the financial plan that produces that money. So when we talk about it, it's very important to lay out a budget, and that's going to also fulfill your dreams, put you where you want to go and help you fulfill your dream. It's really your financial roadmap to help you accomplish those dreams that you have in your business and in your life and with your team members in it. So we're going to talk going through your budget plan. And your budget is a combination of looking at your historical information, what's happened in the past, and you're going to use that past to predict what's going to happen in the future. Looking at the past and then looking forward, what can we expect to happen? That's really what we've done in the past, and then predict it to expect what the future will hold for us. Your budget should be used by you and your team as a regular tool to make decisions inside your business. And today we're really going to cover what I'm going to start with, the first 8 steps of planning your budget. We're going to carry you through that process. And really step number 1 is obviously we're going to talk about what is an operational budget. And really an operational budget, you're going to forecast your income, the revenue coming in, and the expenses when you're looking at your every single line item of your income statement. So you're going to kind of sit there and say, hey, how much revenue do I expect to come in? How much am I going to expect to pay on labor? What is my material cost? And you're going to do that by month, come up with your monthly budget, and then every single month going in there will wind up fulfilling what your annual budget should be. So you're going to look at that and tally all that up. And then one thing you've got to look at is your capital budget. How much money do you expect to reinvest into your business next year? Capital expenditures is really any amount of money spent on any type of product or tools, equipment that has a long-term benefit, something that, it's going to last for many years. A big expense for us, and I assume it's a big expense for you, is one of his trucks, right? We've gone through that in years past. We've showed you what we do at Hiller, how we take a truck, and then when how many years we expect it to last as far as years, mileage, and things like that. Equipment and tools, if you're buying a lot of equipment and tools going into next year, those are things that are obviously going to be capital investments. Real estate purchase, if you need to decide that, hey, we've outgrown this facility, I need to start looking for a new facility, or I'm going to buy some land and build a new facility, whatever that case means. So real estate will be in there. Any type of office remodeling, any type of big expense for computer software. I know with everything going up into the cloud, you would think that it would get less expensive as far as some of these capital expenditures. But you know what? It seems like we still have to have servers. And I don't really understand it. That's not today's lesson. Why I have to have internal servers with cloud servers, I don't understand. But we still spend a tremendous amount of money on computer and software. So those are all capital investments. They're going to last more than 1 year. And Philip, obviously, I'll pull you in here and say, hey, do you have anything that you'd like to add when we talk about capital expenditures?
A lot of folks have asked me, what is the right amount of capital investment? And the answer that I typically give, not including real estate and not including acquisitions, is about 2.5% to 4% of net sales. That's a good rule of thumb on average, understanding that year to year may be different. If you're averaging less than that, you may not be reinvesting enough back into the business to allow for sustainability. When I see lower than these numbers for businesses that we're evaluating or potentially looking at for acquisition, it tells me one of two things. Either A, they're positioning the company for sale, or B, they're heading into a problem, a massive fleet renovation that's needed or replacement that's needed. On the other hand, if it's too high, if I look at a number that sees 10% on average, you probably are looking at underutilization of assets. So good rule of thumb, 2.5 to 4% on an annual basis.
Okay, that's good. And really, if it's lower than that, then obviously you could have a year. If it's really low for a couple of years, then you could have a high expense in the following year.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So it may not be sustainable. You know, we ran through a period of that during the pandemic, Jimmy, where we had supply chain shortages out there, couldn't get fleet as frequently and as easily as we could. So we had a little bit of a delay and purchases were pushed out. So we went through exactly that.
Yeah, and it was low, and now it's creeping up on the high side for us, but it wasn't planned. It just, COVID let that happen. So if you've seen that happen, obviously in years past, and you're looking at it and you're sitting there saying, hey, I've had an increase in profitability, and think that, hey, maybe that we're performing better, but if you look at your depreciation expense and it's lower than what it historically has, and then all of a sudden it flips and now it's going to be higher than what it has been in the past. So thank you for that, Philip. Step number 3 is really the budgeting period that we're going to talk about. And for most businesses, the budgeting period is going to be on an annual basis, and most people January through December. But you've got to be specific to when your business has its financial year start and year end. So just have to adjust that. But it's really the same process that we're going to go into. It doesn't make any difference whether it's January 1st or August 1st, depending on what your particular situation is. And then once you get the budgeting period, which is relatively simple, we'll talk about the budgeting. Step number 4 is budgeting format. And I think everybody on this call today really should understand this. We've given you smart financials provided for your income statement from Praxis S10, and your budget should match the smart financials line by line. So the budget in the income statement on the smart financials should be exactly what it is. You know, what your revenue is, what your expenses are. Exactly every line item on there should match up, and you should be budgeting every single one of those lines a certain amount of expenses to go inside each category. And then this is where we get into it, and Philip and I worked a little bit on this the last few weeks. But really talking about step number 5 is your budgeting review cycle. And this review cycle is really the frequency when you will review the actual performance, what you did month by month, to what you expected to do in your budget month by month. And you should review each line item, actual budget, with your team members every single month. And so I'd ask you this: when do you expect your financials to be finalized each and every month? You know, when we look at it, we have a certain date on the calendar that we expect it to be done. We take into account the days of the week. Sometimes the first will wind up on Saturday or Sunday, and it's hard to get them done when people aren't working. But what I'd recommend is you look at your calendar, calendar for all of next year, every single month, and schedule these dates in advance of when you expect them to be done. So, and put them on the calendar. So, and I'll go through an example. I'll put on the calendar both in your electronic calendar, in your computer, and on your phone. And if you use a paper calendar, which I use both of them, a paper planner, put it on that too. So now when you expect your financials to be done, and then go ahead and expect, write down when you're going to have these review meetings with your team. So in my case, I actually have 2 review meetings. So we have one a day that on this calendar. If you pop that up there, Harry, if you look it on here, the month closeout, this is the day for all next year that we expect the month to be closed on by. And then I have an accounting team review. So I want to meet with Philip and his team. so that they can go over the performance, and that prepares me for the operational team review. So I have two of them that I look at and want those pre-scheduled for all of next year. So we've got those on the calendar. Everybody in the company will know about it, and we can go ahead and plan for those particular days in advance, and everybody should know that. And Philip, we talked about this yesterday a little bit. We talked about the operational team, and when you meet with them, and I'm kind of going in reverse of the way my schedule is, but really looking at what insight am I looking for from my operational team. And when you look at it, the budget, like I said before, is simply just a plan on what you expect to do for the year, the month, and really the day when you get down to it. It's a daily plan. But in this case, we're talking about the month. And sitting down with the operational team and say, did you accomplish what you set out to do when you put together this plan at the beginning of the year? If you met it or exceeded budgeted expectations, it's time to celebrate. It's time to give everybody some high five, give some pats on the back, and say, hey, we did a great job. Let's continue on the path that we're doing. If you did not achieve the expectations, you got to sit down with them and have your operational team, the people that are running those on the day-to-day basis, give you the insight on why it didn't happen. What was the reason we did not achieve the plan that we said we were going to do? And then really important, what are we going to do differently moving into next month? And really you should do that on a daily basis. But what are you going to do next month to get back on track? What are we going to do to get back to the budgeted level, to the goal and the plan that we put in place? And then you've got to kind of find up and say, hey, is there something that I need to do to support you better? Are there any resources that you need from the owner, manager, general manager, if it's a service department, that I need to help you to meet those expectations moving forward? Because that's really what it is, coming together as a team and saying, hey, what's the problem? What's the solution? And how can I help you now moving forward to achieve those goals that we set out? Why don't you cover the insight from the financial team, Philip?
I think there's some basic information that we're going to provide each month, but I also, I run into things that I may want to emphasize that are unique to a particular period. But basically, we're looking at cash flow reporting, asset utilization, of course, comparisons of actuals to budgets in our financial statements, and because we're a multi-trade organization, we're breaking that down by location and by trade. We're looking at financial analysis of trends, any risks that are identified for the period, and then opportunities for improvement. Now, obviously, this is going to vary depending on your particular business. For example, there's companies out there that may be exclusively commercial, dealing with payment terms to customers, net 30 days, and oftentimes extends beyond that. Cash flow is going to be really critical component versus a residential services business that may be COD. So again, this will be tailored to unique aspects of your business.
Okay. Well, thank you. And the step number 6 when we look at it is really the budget variance report that you're going to look at. And each month, your accounting team, and I know we're talking about CFOs and controllers and things here. Your structure may be a little bit different, but somebody still has to perform these activities. But your accounting team should be producing monthly actual performance against the budgeted performance. So it's a real easy report that should come out of just about any accounting software. Your budgeted performance is what you expected to do. And then obviously what actually happened is your actuals, and you're going to review the variances and the difference between the two. How much difference in there, up or down, based on what you expected to do. Do you have any follow-up thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would advise to pay attention to two things. Number one, yes, you're looking at variance to dollars, but it's also important to pay attention to the variance relative to percentage of sales. So you may look, for example, and see well, I'm up $10,000, but it very well could be because sales, additional sales beyond what you expected, drove that additional expense. So it's important to look at both. You not only have to see and understand the variance, but what corrective action will be needed to get us back on track. So, second part of that I might want to add, I know a lot of people will pay attention to negative variance, but I want to advise people to look at positive variances also. If I have more revenue than expected or less expense than expected, why? What caused that? And then ultimately, is it sustainable? Is it repeatable into future periods?
Okay. When we look at an example there, Philip.
This is an example of a cost of goods sold segment for a particular business, and you can see first column depicting, actual dollars compared to the budget. So this is an example of what we're looking at. You'll look at percentage of net sales on each of the two, what was budgeted. So as you scan through that, cost of sales labor, hey, that's a good thing. It's $13,000 less than we expected, especially good when you're considering net sales is more than we expected. So is this good management or is it something else? But you need to understand why it's different than what we predicted.
All right, and then obviously step number 7 is really who do you need to get involved in this budgeting process, and we'll call it your budgeting team. We look at it, and by the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning of it, we do have the chat open. So if you have any questions as we're going through here, if we have some time towards the end, we'll be happy to open it up, and if not, we'll try our best to answer the questions at a later date for you. But when you look at the budgeting team and who you really need to get involved with it, obviously the CEO, the president of the company, the CFO, controller in there. But the CEO and the CFO are really the leaders of the budget team. And it's really their job to set the budget expectations. And I know for me, I want them really, really high. And Philip tries to calm me down a little bit, bring me back down to reality from time to time. So you really need both of those. I can't see why we can't double revenue next year, but he explains to me that we can't. But anyway, so we kind of balance each other off, and it's our job to set those expectations. If you have a controller, their job is obviously a lot of the legwork, a lot of the, and I say computer work and numbers side of it to assist the CEO and the CFO to help manage that budget. The controller's job is really to help us manage the budget throughout the days, weeks, and month, and throughout the year. The controller is really responsible for putting together all the working documents, the budget sheets, and formatting and producing the financial reports on a monthly basis, which in most cases we're talking about an income statement. There's other reports too, but that's the main one I think everybody looks at, and for sure with the budget. This will show you obviously the budgeted revenue produced compared to the budget, as well as every line item on the expense with the variances and the difference between each line. This is what we expected revenue to bring in. This is the expenses. This is what the cost we expected for each one of those line items. And the controller really should notify the CEO, the owner, the CFO when they see the company's income and or expenditures aren't lining up with projections. So they should be, and hopefully they're the first red flag that says, hey, something really looks out of whack in this particular case. We said that we were going to spend this, and this is, it's way more, or, hey, we haven't spent but a fraction of this money, and are we waiting on something big to come in? The controller and or the accountant is really kind of like the watchdog that provides oversight and ensures that the company stays on track and stays within budget. They're the gatekeeper, so to speak, to ensure that the expenditures do not exceed in these budgeted accounts that we have. If they see something coming in that's getting out of whack, we want them to throw up that red flag. And then in most cases, that's what I was saying, if you don't have a CFO, you don't have a controller, you're probably going to have a bookkeeper of some sort that's going to assist you in helping make some of these decisions, watching some of these accounts. with maybe an outside accountant or things like that. And the bookkeeper is going to enter all the transactions into your software and make sure that everything is going to the right category for each one of these line items. So you're not getting material and equipment mixed up. You're not getting the light in with the rent or things like that, making sure that all these categories are really lined up. And then Philip, I'll let you pick up here.
Obviously, this presentation is based on Hiller's company organization chart. It may be very different for you. You may only have a bookkeeper, or you may be the person that's not only managing the business, but providing all the accounting at night after everybody goes home. Regardless, someone's got to be responsible for it. Now, I'm often asked, what's the difference? And I put a couple of thoughts together. Ultimately, an experienced financial person likely sees things in financial reports that aren't readily observed by the layman reader, by others. There's a difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant. A bookkeeper, as Jimmy mentioned a second ago, is a transaction recorder for the most part. There are experienced bookkeepers that can go beyond that, but for the most part, they're recording transactions. An experienced accountant should provide perspective. And then someone that's really good or has experience is more of an operational accountant, and that person can provide both perspective and advice or solutions.
Okay. One other thing, and obviously we're talking a lot about the accounting department and the financial team, but there's really other people that you've got to get involved to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And this is really your department heads should be included in the budgeting process to ensure that, hey, one that they've got ownership. Hey, I've made part of this. I said that this is what I'm going to do on each and every day of the month. So they've got to own that. They've got to have it in their heart that says, hey, when I say I'm going to run 20 calls, for example, today, then I'm going to put up 20 calls for today. And that they also, that feeds into the goals of the company. So that everybody's got to be aligned in the putting together on this, from the department heads, the service manager, install manager, the sales manager, if you have one. Everybody's got to say, this is what we have to do to accomplish that, and they've got to have their input into it. One of the things that we talk about, obviously, is the smart financials. And, the very first category on the smart financials may be the only fun one in the whole thing, and that's the revenue that's produced. And, we talk about it, the past is one of the best predictors in the future as we talk about it. So look at what you have done in past years when we talk about revenue cases to help you make predictions on what we expect to have happen into the future.
Most financial folks would say that the three most important elements of a budget are people, data, process. So people, and Jimmy obviously talked about buy-in, but ultimately it's people that create a budget. People must have buy-in. The people must understand why you're going through this process, and ultimately you've got to have that to have accountability to performance. Certainly a budget is dependent on solid information, data. Previous year's financial information is critical. And finally, you need to follow your prescribed process to include review in order for this to be the most effective tool possible. If you don't, and you set out a calendar and you don't follow it, ultimately you're sending a message to your team, this is not important.
Okay. So let's go through and establish your revenue and profit goals. And this is where we're digging into the meat of it. Your operating budget should be geared to move your business towards achieving the goals you have for your business. So we've talked about it. Your 5-year plan or your success blueprint. But you must set your monthly revenue goals and really calculate your profit based on achieving the certain revenue goals that you've established. And obviously we have a formula here that I'll ask Philip to cover for us.
Yeah, we'll look at this in a couple of different ways. One, the most basic way, how do you build an operating profit expectation? take the numbers from your most recent income statement, but your revenue goal times your gross profit expectation minus operating expenses ultimately equals operating profit. So as we're looking at, let's think about an example. If $4 million is your revenue prediction and you expect 45% gross profit or $1.8 million minus predicted operating expense of 1.2 million, which in this example is 30%, you wind up with an operating profit expectation of $600,000 or 15%.
Okay. So you're going to set your monthly and annual profit goals. Choose your profit goals and use the goals to calculate your required revenue to meet those goals. So we're really going to go in reverse in this case, right? So we went with the revenue first, and now we're going to start with the profit goal. And there could be, and you may have some say so in the reasons why you would want to do this, but you're going to try to establish, hey, this is what I need profit-wise, or this is what my goal is profit-wise, and then you're going to calculate the revenue needed to generate the profit that you desire. And we're going to really, I'll let Philip walk you through a different formula in a different format to come up with the profit and then try to drive the revenue to support that.
Yeah, so targeting net sales, going about this backwards. You have a bottom line target for whatever reason that may be. You need to take it home. You want to reinvest back in the business. You want to buy additional business. Determine what that is. Forecast your cost of goods sold based on historical performance. You may want to adjust that if you've got potential price increases. Forecast your operating expenses based on most likely historical performance and likely cost increases, which we've all seen a lot in key areas, fuel, insurance, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. So let's talk about an example. If you've got a desired profit of $1 million, you expect your cost of goods sold expense is 55%, leaving gross profit of 45%, and you expect your operating expenses to be 30%. The formula is your profit target, or the $1 million, divided by 1 minus the cost of goods sold percentage minus operating expense. So let's take a look at this using those numbers. Again, desired profit $1 million, cost of goods sold 55%, expected operating expense 30%. The formula, $1 million divided by 1 minus the 55% cost of goods sold minus the 30% operating expense expectation. Restated, $1 million divided by the results of that 1 minus 0.55 minus 0.30 or 0.15 equals $6.6 million. So you can see in our example, recast that, net sales, 6.6 million, cost of goods sold, 3.6 million, 55%, leaving $3 million in gross profit. You've got 30% in operating expense, or $2 million, leaving the net profit target that you set out at the beginning of $1 million.
Now that's a great way to look at it and say that just like what you was talking about, in this case right here, we wanted to produce $1 million of profitability, and then going back and following up and saying, okay, to get this $1 million in profitability, I have to produce this much revenue, which is a good way to look at it. But I want to caution everybody here to beware of setting goals that may not be realistic. Just because you say I want to profit $1 million doesn't mean that $6.6 million in revenue is attainable in your business. Use it as a guideline to kind of help you work that way, but it's really better to establish goals that you know are obtainable. So don't put things out there that are unrealistic. It'll frustrate you and it'll frustrate your team members to do the same. But at the same time, looking at your goals and how you want to push your business, if you do it that way, it may force you to reach a little bit towards the desired goals, push a little bit harder to get those results. And really, but you're going to look at your historical information to determine what's realistic, and then figure out where that right balance is want to stretch a little bit. You don't want to sit back and what we call sandbag, but you don't want to create unrealistic goals or budgets that now your team is going to gets frustrated. It's going to frustrate you because they're not able to do that. And really, this is historical past plus the predictions. What you predict is going to happen in the future is really going to be your budget, and it's going to help you make the decisions that you need to make it happen.
Think about a strategy for anything that's in your budget. If it, for example, you are planning for significant growth, how are you going to do that? And that's the thing that we always challenge our team. They've got a budget and I'm going to grow 20%. Well, how are you going to do that? Is it because of price increase? Is it because we're going to run more jobs, which require more trucks, more technicians? How is it going to happen? And you have to have a strategy to support it. If somebody just has it, I don't think it's going to happen just because the calendar changes from December to January. It's got to be supported with a plan. Also, especially in the review part of the budget process, challenge improvements that are predicted. For example, lower field labor costs. How are we going to do that? Or do you have a field operations team that's going to take a pay cut? Probably not. Are they going to be more efficient? Maybe. How are you going to do that? And does the math make sense? Okay. One of the things I will say about the math making sense, start using rationalization of numbers. If you've got total labor expense, for example, of $120,000 for the year, but you're planning to have 10 technicians, that's an average of $12,000 a year per technician, likely not going to work. So think about that. Use common sense when you're evaluating, does this make sense, everything that's put together.
Okay, you're on a roll, so I'm just going to let you keep going.
Consider other factors. Would caution the group regarding prediction, including economic factors. I know everyone listening today understands the economic factors that are affecting the country today. And one of the things I'll talk about, of course, is cost of money. Cost of money, the Federal Reserve's has changed by 5.5%, the federal funds rate, just in the last 2 years. This makes a major difference. This is a monthly payment game, especially with HVAC install. And what you could afford at 3% interest rates is very different than what people can afford at 6.5, 9.5 points. So think about that. Think about the effect on your average tickets, given the cost of money. Regarding historical data, review notes from prior periods to remember unique circumstances that may not be repeatable. So one of the things that we do here, it's not just financial statements that we can easily go back and look at. We do a really good job of keeping notes that include our financial analysis to go back, because I can't see that. I can't remember, especially a year from now, what occurred in a particular month. Was it a weather change, abnormal weather pattern, a flood, a tornado? We've all just lived through a lot of issues relative to the pandemic that started in March of 20. If you weren't thinking about that, in our particular market, we had a massive drive for generator sales. Unusual for us. People were out of the workforce in their typical commercial buildings. They were working from home. That drove up demand. That drove up the need to stay without disruption, and so generator sales spiked through the roof. Now, is that repeatable and sustainable? Does that need to be the foundation for the subsequent year's budget? Maybe or maybe not. Related, because generator sales spiked through the roof, guess what happened? We had supply chain shortages. So we wound up with periods that were super robust, followed by periods that were not, because we couldn't get equipment, nor could anyone else. So think about those things. Take good notes so you can reflect back on that as you're preparing subsequent period budgets.
Okay. That's good information. Thank you. You know, when we talk about the revenue and where it's coming into your business, there are really only two places the revenue comes in: from existing customers that you have, your existing customer base, club members first, and then existing customers, and marketing, the marketing pass or avenues that you go out there to the marketplace to bring in new customers to drive your revenue up. And once again, you've got to look at your historical call counts for each month in each little category that they're coming in. How many calls are we getting from our existing customer base? How many calls are we getting from the new marketing avenues or marketing channels, is what Nick likes to say it, that we're out there advertising? So we look at it, the number of demand calls expected for each and every single month, January through December in my fiscal year that we're talking about. Once you know that the demand calls, and I'll go through an example here in a minute, the demand calls that you expect to come in each and every day for the whole month, that's going to add up to the total for that particular month. Then you've got to figure out, hey, what's my average ticket going to be for the demand calls that's coming in? And this is where we did this last year because we did have a price increase. So ask Philip to do an analysis on it and say, okay, we know that this is what our average ticket are. We're increasing our pricings. What can we now plan for our new expected average ticket to be based on, hey, we raised our prices 10% or whatever the case may be. And if you're on true transparency pricing, you know that the material is going to go up, so you're going to get a little bump each and every year no matter what. And even in the pandemic, it was really bad. We saw a lot of average tickets going up, but some of those were inflated because it was just based off the material cost associated. And once you figure out what your calls coming in by day, week, and month, and then total up for the year, you're going to have to do the same thing for your maintenance side of it. How many maintenance calls do you expect to run each and every month? There's certain months that we've talked about it, the 6 seasons of HVAC, and scheduling out those demand and maintenance calls to make sure you keep the boards full. And you got to figure out what's your average maintenance ticket going to be, because once again, are you planning on raising your club membership and on the single tune-ups that you have? So we have had a little bit milder temperature this year, especially during the air conditioning side. So we actually, our one-time tune-ups, we reduced those. So will that affect it a little bit? Yeah, and hopefully the offset will happen. We'll get more jobs on the board and be able to increase that. And then you're going to have to look at, okay, what do we expect the number of replacement opportunities for demand calls? And Terry's talked about it till he's blue in the face that hey, a certain percentage of every demand call that comes in is going to be a replacement opportunity, a gift, so to speak. And you've got to know what that percentage is. So we've asked you, we've begged you to start tracking that. Hopefully everybody's doing it, and as you go into the budget season, you'll know exactly what percentage of those demand calls coming in will be that. And then once you know what that percentage is, how many of those replacement opportunities are now going to be able to have lead set? So once again, if you're tracking it properly, you should know that. And then once you know what the leads are going to be set, and then you know what your conversion rate is over to installs, you'll know the total number of installs that you're going to now produce off those demand calls. So now you can predict month by month, exactly, really day by day, exactly what's going to happen. And that'll give you the total replacement dollars by month, okay, that's going to come from your demand calls coming in. And then you, just to keep track and keep up to whether you're doing good or bad, then you want to obviously figure out, and if you've done this long enough, you won't have to go through that one step. You just know that, hey, my revenue per opportunity is X, and you can plug that number in, and now you've got your replacement opportunity without doing all that counting and dividing of what you're going to do. So it just cuts away a step. I'd ask you to go ahead and do it, and then confirm that hey, I am producing the right revenue per opportunity that you have. And then you've got to do the exact same thing. You've got to keep up with that exact same with the maintenance side of it. The number of maintenance calls that you're going to run, and then the number of replacement opportunities that you expect to come from there. The number of leads that you expect to turn over once you know what that percentage is, and that's going to lead to the number of installs that you have. And then once again, you're probably going to go back. Well, that's going to give you your total replacement dollars. And then you can do that calculation and say, hey, am I on track with what I should be expecting based on my historical averages. And you say, hey, I'm producing the right revenue per maintenance opportunity. Check that off, and you move on with it. And then obviously the second place that customers come in revenue and do business is through your marketing efforts, right? Everybody on this call that I'm aware of is probably going to be spending somewhere between 5 and 8% of every dollar that comes in there just to produce a call coming in. And you've got to be able to track that. And you've got to look back at your historical advertising channels and try to sit there and, we're spending this on TV, we're spending this on radio. This is where we're spending our money. What is the return? How many calls do we expect to get off of each one of these marketing channels? And hopefully, once again, we've been tracking it. We've been keeping up with it, so we know, hey, we're getting X amount from PPC. We're getting X amount clicks for our website. We're getting some from radio. We're getting some from TV. And you'll be able to look at that and calculate, hey, this is what we've done historically, and this is what we expect to do in the future based on that. And I understand how difficult this is. Nick wants to pull his hair out too when we start talking about how are we going to keep up with it. I got to get with Megan and say, Megan, how are we going to keep up with these calls, where this call is coming from? And but it's so important. We're spending millions of dollars a year, and we have to understand what revenue is coming in by each marketing channel, and how many calls is it producing per each marketing channel for each month, both from January through December. Demand calls and the average ticket that's being produced that. Then we'll go through the same process, which I'm not going to go through it. The number of replacements that are going to come off of those, exactly what we've already kind of went through and explained out, the leads that are going to be produced on that from every single marketing channel throughout the whole for each marketing channel for each month throughout the months that you run those calls in. And then once you start getting in there, then you're going to start looking at each one of these channels. You're going to have your calls, and you're going to start putting together some of the numbers on by day, by month, so you can come up with what your monthly revenue is expected for each one of those months of the calendar year. And one of the things that you've got to look at, and I've got to confess, when I was sitting down with Sandra and I was putting this together, I counted January. So I had to go back after she put some of the presentation together. I said, Sandra, I made a mistake. Unless y'all want to come in, and we could take a vote. If everybody wants to come in and work on January 1st, we can go ahead and fill that as a full working day. And she said, no, Jimmy, I won't be in. So I said, okay, I've got to readjust, because guess what? We're not going to run the same amount of calls on January 1st that we expect to run on January 2nd, because guess what? I'm not going to have that many people working there. So the first step is go through your calendar for all next year, and which days are you going to have people off the holidays that you do, because you have to eliminate that from the daily call counts, which is going to, once again, from the demand calls, the maintenance calls, to the replacement opportunities, could be a huge number based on people not being there. And you don't want to put together information that is going to be wrong. So this is how I do it. And once again, I'm really old school. I like to see it. Philip likes to put it in computers and do all that, but I like to see it where I can touch it and feel it. See, I can look here on this calendar and say that Monday, January 1st is going to be a holiday in our organization, so I've got 0 calls. We'll probably have some people on call to run some emergencies, so we'll probably bring in a little bit of revenue. But just really on that, we're not going to. And this is where I went through there and did every single day of every single day differently on some of them throughout the month. And I'll look at this. So if you look at it, when you talk about Sundays, we expect just to, as an example, one technician, we expect he's going to run four demand calls coming in. So if I calculate that throughout there, 4 calls, that's going to give me 16 demand calls based on the Sunday call count in this particular day, or this particular month. And then you can do the same thing. Monday and Tuesday, except for January 1st, we expect to have 10 technicians. We expect each one of them to run 10 calls per technician. So now I'm going to have 40 calls, and we're just going to add those all up. So 40 calls times 9, it's got 360 total calls now. And we're going to do that. I have one less technicians on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that's going to total up the total calls there. And then obviously on Saturday we have 2 technicians that we expect to be running calls. They're going to run 4 calls each. That's 8 demand calls for that particular day. And we're just going to take all these calls throughout the day, or throughout each day for the month, and we sit there and say at the end of the month we should run, based on the schedule that we've laid out, 876 demand calls for that particular month. We're going to take the total demand calls, and now this is where the average ticket comes into play. And we're going to sit there and say, what is our average ticket? Well, we've got 376 times $350 average ticket. Now I've got $306, $306,600 for the month of January, the demand revenue for January. Now we've checked that off. We've got the days that we're going to work. We've got the calls that we expect to run. We've got the average ticket. And now at the end of the month, we're looking at $306,000. And you've got to take that and do that for February, March, April, all the way through the end of the year, and make sure that you're doing that, and that will total up for your demand service revenue per month for the whole year. Now you've got to go back and you've got to do the exact same thing for your maintenance department. You're going to look at how many maintenance techs am I going to have running per day. You know, in this case, the example I put together, I said we're not going to do maintenance on Saturday and Sunday. Monday's a holiday, but I've got 8 maintenance calls on Tuesday. They're not off on the weekend, so we're going to keep the same throughout the month. Each one of them is going to run 8 calls times 22. That's going to give me 176 maintenance calls for the month of January. Now I've got to take that and use the same theory that we did before. I've got 176 maintenance calls. We've got a $225 average ticket, and that's going to give me $39,600. And you're going to do that once again every single day for every single month of the whole year, and that will come up and give you the maintenance revenue. In this case, for January, is $39,000. And now we're not done with that. Now we got to sit there and say, okay, we know we've got our demand calls done, we've got our maintenance calls, and now we have to figure out what are we going to do for the replacement revenue aspect of our business. And just as I touched on before, you need to know the number for your business, what the replacement opportunity percentage is for demand and maintenance calls. So when we look at that and we're calculating, we knew that we plan on running 876 demand calls. I'm using 30% because I've never seen one lower than 30%. So that's going to give us 263 replacement opportunities. Now those are those gifts that everybody likes, and now we got to decide. And this is where it helps you so much if you've been tracking this data like we've been asking you to, that now you can start predicting, hey, if I run 876 calls, I know that I'm going to have 263. Now, how many of those am I going to now turn over to set a lead, or if you have a selling tech, going to be able to convert to a replacement? And so out of those 363, we said, okay, about 70% of them, we believe these are demand calls, so they're broken. They're past the age of expectant life. And now we believe that we can get 184 of those to set a lead on. In my case, in yours would maybe be a sale. And out of those 184 lead set, how many do we think we can convert to an install? And in this case right here, I believe an acceptable range would be 147. But once again, you have to understand and know what your particular numbers are, so you can now say, hey, if I sit here and say I'm going to do 147 installs, this is where they're coming from the demand replacement. So I got this now. I'm going to sit there and say 147, what's my average ticket? Is $8,000. I should produce replacements out of my demand service department, $1.1 million and $76,000, $1,176,000 in demand replacement revenue out of my demand service department. And that really is going to make everybody on this call pretty happy if you can produce those results. And now we're just going to do the math to say, hey, is that good or is that bad? Like I talked about earlier, 1,176,000 divided by the 263 replacement opportunities. I'm producing $4,471 per demand opportunity. I feel like that's a good number. So, hey, now we're going to check it off. We say, hey, I'm doing good in my demand department. And now we got to do the exact same thing with your maintenance calls. So we had 176 maintenance calls on it. Same theory, 30% would give us 53 replacement opportunities. You're probably not going to convert as many of those to leads, because guess what? You're out there on a maintenance call. The system is still working, but you're going to bring it up. Out of those 53, we say we can get 60% to set us a lead. That means 32 leads set. Out of those 32 leads set, how many do you think we can sell or convert to a replacement? That should net us 19 installed systems out of our main maintenance department. So if we look at that, we got 19 installed jobs, $8,000 average ticket, and it should produce us $152,000 from our maintenance department for replacement sales installed. Once again, we're going to do the math and just try and check and see, hey, how are we doing? We got $152,000 divided by the 53 replacement opportunities, $2,867. So now we sit there and say, hey, we now have to do a little bit better work, right? We have to look at it and say, hey, is that good or is that bad? How are we doing? In this case, it winds up okay. 2,750 is the number we're looking for. So, hey, we've done well in our maintenance department. They're converting what we think we should do. And then this right here is now it's going to sit there and pull up. Okay, we know what our demand revenue is because we've calculated it. We know the calls. We know the revenue. We know the maintenance calls that we're going to do, and we know the revenue associated with that. Now we've got the demand replacement revenue. We've got the installs that have to do, and now we got the maintenance replacements on there. Now we just have to look at, hey, we're going to get some leads from our marketing pathways. We're going to, whether we're doing tune-ups, whether we're doing for demand calls, you're going to get some people, or you're doing some, hey, replacement ads, specials, hey, buy one, get one free, 60 months, no 0% financing, whatever it is, you're going to get some. And I just plugged in a number, but you should know how many leads you're getting from your marketing avenues for replacements in this. I just plugged in 20 for this particular month, and that should give us $160,000 in replacement sales from our marketing avenues, but use whatever your numbers is. And we're going to total all those up. Once we total them all up, we're going to have a monthly revenue projection for each department. And that's going to total $1.8 million, a little over $1.8 million. And that's going to give you what your January revenue is for that particular month and year based on the calls that we've looked at. And really, you're going to have to do this for every month of the whole year, taking into account, obviously we talked about it, the 6 seasons of HVAC. The demand calls are going to go up and come down based on the seasonality of your market that you're in. It's going to produce the revenue that you need every single day, as long as you're putting up those numbers. And that's going to total up to the weekly numbers, which is the monthly numbers. And then you're going to do that every single day for the whole for the month, and then that's going to do that for the month, for the whole year. And Philip, have you got anything that you'd like to share with the practice members that we haven't talked about?
Yes, sir. I promise you, we've been doing this a long time here, and each year our process gets a little better. We literally sit down at the end of the budget administrative season, and I'll sit down with the accounting team and we'll talk about what went well, what could be better. I also solicit feedback from our field operations group, take a lot of notes, and we work on those improvements later in the year for the subsequent period. But one of the things we do is that we use systems to help tracking. For example, we now build our budgets in a format that allows for much easier importation into the ERP system we use, for example. I think most know we use ServiceTitan, and our accounting system. I could remember several years back where we were literally hand keying all of that stuff. So that's just an example of one of the improvements that cut out literally hours of administrative work. Most of the work in your budget administrative work that is, should be on the front end. If you're taking advantage and utilizing systems, and most ERP systems will do this, the comparison work, the review work should be much, much easier on the back end.
Okay. Have we got any questions in there, Harold? No questions. So it looks like Philip did a good job of explaining everything to y'all today. So no questions. I'll just wrap it up real quick. Obviously, you're going to look at your calendar and kind of go through there and say, hey, how many technicians do I expect to work on January 2nd? How many do you expect to work on January 3? And go throughout there. That's what I'll call your manpower plan. And then you got to sit there and make a decision as a company and saying, how many calls do we expect each technician to run, both on demand and maintenance calls throughout the year. And then you're going to lay out your daily schedule for every month of the year, for January, February, all the way through December, and calculate it up, your demand, maintenance, and your install. You're going to take those and use the math and just calculate it up based on what your average ticket is, and that's going to total up to what your monthly revenue by department is, and you'll kind of add those up, and that'll give you your total. And that's going to really what your plan is. You're going to make that your monthly plan, and you got to go through there. And once again, I believe the best way to do that once you have your monthly plan is go back to the daily plan and measure against that every single day so you can see what you're doing. And when you're off track that day, then you start making adjustments. You know, if you're off demand calls today, the high is pretty likely that you're going to be off demand calls tomorrow. So what are you going to do to adjust that to make sure that you are hitting the budget expectations that you have? And that's really where we're getting into executing the plan that you put out. The budget is a plan, and how well you execute it will determine the success that you have at the end of the year. And you've got to start making adjustments throughout the year. If you do that, you will build a super fantastic business, and you will have a super fantastic 2024. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.